Congress of South African Trade Unions has described the government's vaccine rollout efforts so far as gross incompetence with deadly consequences. Cosatu says it is worried about government's pronouncements of a vaccine program that lacks implementation. The condemnation comes after the Trade Union Federation's Special Central Executive Committee meeting. And of course, the trade union has raised concerns about government's ability to meet its own targets. Let's speak now to Cosatu's Matthew Parks. Matthew, good evening, and thank you so much for your time. Certainly a lot of concern is being expressed here by yourselves, and you're not the only ones, who are expressing concerns when it comes to the rollout of the vaccine program. Take us through why Cosatu is so concerned around this particular plan.
Sure, we're concerned because people are dying. Every day that the vaccine is delayed, more people will die. When we get to the anticipated third wave, the death toll is likely to peak. And of course, the economy cannot recover whilst we're still under varying degrees of lockdown. Equally, the economy cannot afford the periodic tighter lockdowns as well. So we want to get the vaccine out as quickly as possible. We want government's vaccine program to succeed. We can't afford for government to fail. But we're now 4 months into the year, and we've only vaccinated about 250,000 people. That's not even half of 1%. We had been hoping by now to be vaccinating about 250,000 people every single day. We appreciate that these are uncharted territories, that all of us, including government, are feeling in the dark to many degrees. But having said that, we can't afford to relax. We can't afford to sit back and just wait for things to unfold. What frustrates us most is that we have yet to see clear dates upon when are we going to receive the additional vaccines, how is government going to roll them out, what are we going to do to make sure that we reach the 70% vaccination target by December this year, not by February or by June next year. And literally every day delayed has consequences. And for us is the fundamental issue. And we can't simply blame the West and blame other governments for doing what they should have been doing. We have seen many other countries in Latin America, our peers, many other countries in Africa, Asia, have moved very far down the road. As a consequence, only about 9 countries in the world still allowed free travel to South Africa, which means devastating consequences for our tourism industry, which, as you know, is one of our largest employers. Again, it's going to further hamper our efforts to rebuild the economy, to create and to save jobs, etc. So for us, government has to do much better. We appreciate the pressures they're facing, but again, they have to ramp up the game and do so urgently. We did meet with the Minister of Health, Dr. Willem Kiese, today. He gave us some potentially reassuring news that they've paid the deal to Johnson & Johnson, which will be the single dosage vaccine. They're hoping to get dosages on a weekly basis from now on, and that they will be alerting us quite soon, hopefully in the public, about the actual dates. I think that for us, if it can happen, it could be a game changer. But what we've seen to date is, for us, it's a huge disappointment, to be honest.
And Matthew, I have quite a number of, just a few questions to follow on that particular statement. But let's just begin with, as you say, that some countries have been making strides and they've been moving ahead, rightfully so, as you say. But there have been and still remain some concerns around vaccine hoarding, which some of the countries have been accused of.
No, sure. Look, that's simply unbelievable. It's immoral that, for example, Canada can have 150 million dosages for a population of about 34 million. Yes, South Africa, with 60 million people, has only received 250,000. So that is a huge blunder. But equally, governments know this is not a playground out in the international community. The logistics, the procurement, the securing the vaccines, the rollout plans, those are all the homework government should have done before Christmas last year. These are not the things that we should be doing this year. Other countries like Israel, like in Europe, Russia, China, did this work last year. And now that's why they're very far down the road ahead of us. But it can't be acceptable that a small little island country like Seychelles will achieve 70% vaccination by June this year. That Bhutan, a tiny country in the Himalayas, in this past month, vaccinated 70% of the population. Yet we are a serious industrialized economy. We pride ourselves on a capacitated government, and we barely vaccinated a quarter of the health workers of this country, let alone the rest of the population. So for us, we can't afford to slack on this issue. We have to put shoulders together. That includes government, business, and labor. We must all play our part, but government must lead, and it must lead much more decisively and with much greater speed. And we are hoping, after the briefing that the Minister of Health gave us today, that we'll see some significant positive news in the next few weeks, and we can't afford to be disappointed on that front.
I wonder then what Cosatu makes of the latest reports that, now have emerged around the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine. As we have heard that South African scientists are now monitoring reports into the links between this particular vaccine and blood clots, as reported by the European Medicines Agency. What is then Cosatu's reaction to this development?
Look, I think we must always leave medical science to the medical scientists. The rest of us are bystanders. We must always be guided by what our medical authorities in South Africa say. The Medicine Control Council, the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority. We do appreciate that for everybody across the world, this is a new charted scientific territory. There's still significant research being done. And of course, they've had to fast track the whole vaccine development regime because of the pandemic. So we appreciate that. I think with any vaccine, you would know, even the ones we receive as children, you often do have allergic reactions, but that's far better to have an allergic reaction than to have fatalities. I think what we appreciate with the vaccine is that it doesn't guarantee you immunity or that you wouldn't infect others, but it will save your life. It'll prevent you from needing to go to a hospital. So that itself can be a positive game changer. And of course, science, we believe, would evolve more and develop more, and the vaccine's qualities would improve going forward. But I think for us, we'll leave the scientific research to the scientists to guide us. We've always felt that we must always be guided by what health science is telling us. None of us can claim to be vaccine experts. And so for us, we get confidence with the MCC or SAPRA say, yes, this one is fine to go. And we appreciate that not all of these vaccines will be 100% perfect. But as long as they have the majority efficiency rate that we need, then it will take us a significant step forward to saving lives and to easing the pressure on hospitals and to give us space to rebuild this economy.
All right, Matthew, I'm going to ask you just to pause there for a moment. We are going to go for a quick ad break, and then you and I will run up our discussion in just a moment. Let's take a recap of our headline stories here on News at Prime. Popular rapper DMX has passed away at the age of 50 after being on life support for a week following a heart attack. At the same time, world leaders paid tribute to the Duke of Edinburgh following his passing on Friday at the age of 99. And back home, former State Security Minister David Mahlobo has denied allegations of receiving millions of rands in cash from the State Security Agency under the so-called Project Veza. And in your sports, Justin Rose finds himself sharing his lead at the Masters late into the second round of Augusta National. Thanks for staying with us. Let's continue now our conversation with Cosatu's parliamentary coordinator, Matthew Parks. Matthew, thank you so much for staying on. Let's then just talk about, these concerns, as you have raised, that, not enough people have been vaccinated to date. Are you then, convinced that government will meet some of these ambitious targets that it has set for itself?
We'll only be convinced when people have these dosages in their arms. Until then, we would prefer to remain skeptical. I think we've learned over the past decade of state capture and corruption, of the collapse of many key organs of state and SOEs. We'd rather remain skeptical. We don't want to believe in promises or friendship or comradeship. We want to see results. And more so when lives are at stake, especially our members' lives. The infection rate of health workers, of doctors, is horrendous. It's the infection rate of police officers and prison wardens, of municipal cleaners, are often at least 6 times the average infection rate. So many workers have paid the ultimate price. There's robbed families of breadwinners, of parents, etc. So we must remain skeptical. We do believe government's rollout plan to achieve a 67% immunity rate by February or by June next year, to be honest, is too timid. We really need to get this vaccination target of 67% by December this year. Equally, one of the difficulties of the uncharted scientific research on the vaccines is we don't know how long will it cover you for, how long will the immunization last for. Some of the initial research talks about 6 months, so possibly this could be like a flu shot, as we have to all do this once a year. So we really need to build the capacity and to do it quickly and make it a permanent part of our health infrastructure, because this could be part of the new normal life for all of us. So we can't afford to be having delayed targets. And equally, if other countries are moving very far ahead of us and will likely achieve their 70% vaccination rate by September this year and so forth, we can't afford to be the laggards in the world community. It will devastate our trade and our tourism, which are critical to the economy and critical to millions of jobs. So we have to catch up. We have to do it quickly before the possible third wave hits our shores.
And Matthew, on another issue, you're not finding, each other with government when it comes to the wage agreements, and now there's talk of a shutdown. Are you able to tell us how this mass mobilization will then unfold?
Sure. Look, the negotiations are hopefully will still be taking place. We have the pending court case of the Constitutional Court. A date has been set for later this year on the 2020 wage agreement. Initial tabling of offers or demands by our side around the next year wage agreement have been tabled. We're waiting for government to come back to us. They've indicated they need to cost it. But look, to be honest, if government moves ahead with what the Minister of Finance called for, a 4-year wage freeze, which is what is in the budget, members will have to decide what they want to do. And as part of the normal labor relations options for workers to decide if they want to accept it or if they want to refuse it. If they refuse it, an option for them is to go on strike. Workers have the right to go on strike. For us as Cosatu and our affiliate unions, it's critical to protect workers' rights, to expect government to honor signed wage agreements, to expect their salaries to be protected from inflation, not to be eroded by inflation every year. Many public servants are highly indebted. It's a fallacy for government to blame public servants for wanting to earn a living wage. A Minister of Finance earns 2.4 million, but a police constable earns 186,000 rand. A nurse earns under 200,000 rand. So if government is serious, let them reduce the bloated wages of politicians, of managers. Let them reduce the amount of ministers and deputy ministers and MECs. Let them have one single wage agreement for the entire state. But again, the cause of the fiscal crisis is not the wage bill. The wage bill has been stable at 35% of the budget for the last 12 years. What has caused the fiscal crisis is that, according to the Auditor General's reports, we lose about 150 billion rand every year of the state, 10% of the budget, to corruption and wasteful expenditure. We've had to bail out the state-owned enterprises for billions of rands for the last decade, every year. That under the previous leadership of the South African Revenue Service, billions of rands were lost to tax and customs evasion and customs fraud. We lose money because we have a stagnant economy. Companies are closing, they can't pay company tax. Workers are losing their jobs, they can't pay income tax. So if we want to address the fiscal crisis, the ballooning debt and deficit levels, we must address the fundamental causes and not simply seek to dump the bill for looting and corruption upon nurses and teachers and doctors. And yet at the very same time, we want to go and praise these public servants for carrying the nation on their shoulders. Equally, if you impose a 4-year wage freeze upon public servants, what's going to happen is a brain drain from the state. You will see doctors and nurses moving overseas to Dubai, to Canada, to New Zealand, where they'll get paid better wages. You will see teachers moving to private schools, where they'll get paid better wages with less stressful conditions. And that will make public service, quality service delivery, even more difficult for the state to achieve. So it's better for government to engage with Labour on a win-win solution that helps to stabilize the fiscus, but also protects public servants and their families and the right to earn a living wage, the right to protect collective bargaining.
And while pardon me, Matthew, there, while one understands that, of course, they've got to earn, a living wage, and as you say, that they're highly indebted, but an option of a strike could then, pose a real challenge here for this particular rollout plan of the vaccine that you talk about, because certainly it might just disturb the health sector.
Well, look, I mean, workers have the right to strike. That's a constitutional right. It's always an act of last resort for workers. Or when workers go on strike, they lose wages because normally the principle of no work, no pay is applied. So it's not a choice workers take upon lightly. There have not been strikes in the public service for many, many years. But there's a right when workers feel that they're being molested by the state, that the right to collective bargaining is being undermined, that they're being pickpocketed by politicians. They have the right to protect themselves. That's part of the labour market, democracy, and so on. But also, it wouldn't affect the vaccine rollout. In the public service, different categories of workers have essential service agreements or minimum service level agreements. So, for example, there must always be a certain level of certain essential workers on duty. That includes doctors and nurses. It includes police officers and prison wardens to make sure essential deliveries are achieved and that those things like the vaccine rollout is not threatened or undermined at any stage. Other workers would be allowed to exercise that right. So there's quite a detailed agreement already in place for such eventualities.
All right, Matthew Parks there, who is the Cosatu's parliamentary coordinator, just talking to us about some of the concerns around the vaccine rollout plan there. As you would have heard yesterday after the Central Executive Committee meeting, they did express quite a lot of concern at the pace at which this particular rollout plan appears to be moving. Let's go to the